Cristina Baker, and by no means necessary should I be alive today. And I want to take you a little into the journey of my story, where my life began. And I came from a broken home. My parents divorced when I was 7 years old. My dad was an atheist. My mom was a non-practicing Catholic, so there was no God in my home. By the age of 14, I was going out to the bars, I was doing drugs, and I was hanging out with the wrong crowd. I got into self-harm because I felt like I was dead inside. And I just wanted signs that I was still alive. And by the time that I turned 15 years old, I was partying all night, drugging all night, and drinking at the bars. And I came home one night, and my stepdad was standing at the top of the stairs and told me, first he told me that I wasn't worth it. And before he almost pushed me down the steps, my mom said, he told my mom that she had to decide between me and between him. My mom made a decision that night that I had to leave. And so they put me on a one-way ticket from Santa Cruz, Bolivia, where we were living, to Maui, Hawaii. I hadn't seen my dad in 10 years. So with a duffel bag with my entire life in it and an electric guitar on my back, I showed up in Maui, Hawaii, looking for my dad, not knowing if I would recognize him. After about 6 hours sitting in the airport, my dad shows up, and I had black makeup around my eyes, I had spikes, I was black on black on black. And my dad gives me the news that after many years of working in the oil field, he lost everything. He had a bad cocaine addiction. And as I followed in my dad's footsteps, the news dawned on me that this would also be my reality. And he said that he ended up homeless, living in a tent on the beach. And so I asked myself that question, does that mean that I'm homeless too? Well, my dad spent some time on the Maui beach for many months. And after that, some family members found out that I was living homeless, and they brought me to Houston, Texas, and I went from house to house to house. Nobody wanted to deal with a drug-addicted goth teenager. So they shipped me off to Pennsylvania, where I was living in a Red Roof Inn. And my brother's coach, my brother was going to a college in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. And my brother's coach went to a staff meeting at a church that he attended and said that there was an atheist, drug-addicted teen living in a motel. A couple stands up at the staff meeting and they say, we'll take her in. A week before 9/11 in 2001, I show up at this couple's house and they said, welcome to my home. We only have 2 rules in our house, and the first one is that your curfew's 11, and the other one is that you have to go to church with us every Sunday. At that moment, I looked around, I was like, you guys don't understand, I'm an atheist. They said, that's okay, Chris. Welcome to our home. We'd love for you to stay, but you gotta go to church. So every Sunday, I did everything that I could to not go to church. I wore fuzzy slippers. I'd have these black hoodies with obscene words on them, and I would come downstairs, and her name was Mrs. Hess. She would say, great, Chris, come on, we're on our way to church. So every week, I would go to church, and I would hear the pastor preach on the love of God. And at that stage in my life, I didn't know that anything was out there or even existed. And the truth be told is that I had an anger in my heart that I felt like if there was a God, that he had put me in this position and he had done this to me. So when I left their house, I graduated from high school. I got back into the lifestyle of doing drugs and ended up dating a drug dealer. And everything in my life continued to spiral downward from that moment. The moment that changed everything for me, even though I didn't know that God was real, was when I was on my way to I had already scheduled an abortion after I had found out that I was a couple months pregnant. I was leaving my apartment and I get a banging on the door, and it was my drug dealer's girlfriend. She says that she needs to talk to me. She was huge, pregnant, had 2 children in tow, and we go to the bathroom of my apartment and she pulls out a bag with a file in it. She had just printed off some papers, and I could see that it said the state of Texas versus this doctor. And the more that I read, I saw that a young girl, 15 years old, had died on the table having an abortion. And then I recognized the name of the doctor. It was actually the doctor that I was going to see to have an abortion. At that moment, this young woman grabs my shirt and she says to me, "Christina, I know that you don't believe in God, but my God will provide for this baby. I'm asking you not to kill this child." Well, at that stage in my life, I didn't even know that the child that was living inside of me was a child. I always thought that a baby that was inside of you was just a clump of cells and just an embryo. So who is an embryo to dictate my life? But at that moment, looking back on it now, it was God's intervention in my life. See, God doesn't need you to have it all together or even know Him for Him to be working in your life. And so that was when the grace of God met me in my darkest place. I collapsed on the floor, and she said that God would provide for the baby that was living inside of me. And she pleaded with me to not kill this baby. I ended up keeping that child, and I named him Evan. His name actually means